I've never been much of a sitcom person, even when they were funny back in the 80s and early 90s. So when I stumbled across one that's just a little bit funny on Netflix called The Good Place, I had to give it a watch. Yes, this series is woke, and it's also a little bit insulting to Christians, but I'm not so thin-skinned that I can't handle someone poking fun at something I believe in. The premise of this series is a journey of four souls that are condemned to hell. However, their hell has been made to look like heaven, which is referred to as the good place. And after watching the series, I realized why it was produced. It was produced to denounce the existence of God. And in this episode of Office of the Patriot, I'm going to discuss components of this series and other atheistic beliefs which tie into the left's obsession with trying to replace God with government. Hello, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot. In this office, I try to make sense out of the nonsense of the progressive left and Rhino right. If you are a subscriber, thank you for your continued viewership. It is appreciated. If you are a returning viewer, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future presentations. And if you are a first-time visitor to my channel, well, congratulations on finding it. It's usually hidden very well by the YouTube algorithm. However, I do hope you find the content worth coming back for. My name is Myron Ybarra, and I'm your host. I am not a theologian. In fact, I don't regularly attend church, and I haven't cracked open a Bible in years. Yet, despite these failings, I believe in the existence of God, His Son, and our Savior Jesus Christ, and the tenets and stories of the Bible. You might be asking yourself, how can I believe all these things when I just admitted that I haven't opened a Bible in years? Well, I'm not a solar stellar scientist either, but that doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge the existence of the sun. And in my eyes, there's enough evidence to convince me of the existence of God. And I will clarify that point a little bit later in the show, so please stay with me. When I stumbled upon The Good Place, I knew that this series was intended to poke fun at Christianity, and it absolutely met that metric. The idea of this series, this Good Place, was the brainchild of a demon who wanted to torture four souls using some of the 7 deadly sins they embraced while on earth. In this case, envy, greed, pride, and sloth. Each of the souls exhibited some of these vices, and it was the demon's intent to exploit behaviors that glorify these sins, to torture these souls. Sounds a lot like what Democrat leaders are trying to do today to their Democrat sheeple. Unfortunately, for that demon, one of the characters discovers that they are not in the good place, but instead in hell, which requires the demon to reset each of the souls to start the torture over again.
Ready when you are, boss.
Eleanor, what's going on?
It took me a while to figure it out. But just now, as we were all fighting, yelling at each other, and each one of us demanding we should go to the bad place, I thought to myself, man, this is torture. And then it hit me. They're never gonna call a train to take us to the bad place. They can't, because we're already here. This is the bad place.
Oh, man. I can't believe you figured it out. Oh, God. You ruined everything. You know that?
And this goes on and on and on for quite some time. These four souls eventually convince the demon that they are good and deserving of going to the real good place. So, the demon agrees to help them get there, but finds that the system that's designed to determine who goes to the good place and who goes to the bad place doesn't function as it should. So they all work together to develop a better system to decide which souls get to go to heaven and which ones go to hell. And if this sounds like something you've encountered while trying to get your driver's license or maybe your vehicle registration at your local Department of Motor Vehicles, you wouldn't be far off in your understanding of this series concept. But there's some interesting dogma that's wrapped up in this satirical production of heaven and hell. First, in the series, you have the idea of grace through sacrifice, which was one of the precepts of the Old Testament. Human beings fall short of the grace of God. In order for us to be worthy of God's love, it required some type of sacrifice. In the Old Testament, there are numerous examples of this. In Genesis, Abel was accepted by God because of his sacrifice. In 2 Corinthians, sacrifices were offered during the dedication of the temple made by Solomon on behalf of God. It wasn't until God sacrificed his son, Jesus, that man no longer had to sacrifice to be worthy of God's grace. Now, he just has to have faith. And that's what's missing from the series, The Good Place. And I believe this is by design. Ultimately, the four souls get to heaven, and over time, they get, well, bored. So they devise a new system for those who are in heaven to escape their boredom. And that's a return to nothingness. And this is where the show takes on an atheistic view that expresses the idea that from energy we come, to energy we will return. This part of the series just highlights our very limited grasp of what heaven will really be like. And it underscores the necessity of faith when referring to heaven and to God. And this reminds me of something one of my favorite comedians, Ricky Gervais, expressed some time ago. As many of you know, Ricky is a self-proclaimed atheist. He has said many times that he doesn't believe in the existence of God or a God. And he cites many reasons for this. I'll just let him tell you what they are.
And they say things like, if someone proved to you God existed, would you believe? Well, of course I would, by definition. In fact, it would be the greatest scientific discovery of all time. Scientists would celebrate. They'd run round. At the moment, we have no evidence for the existence of any God or anything supernatural. Never have. Possibly never will. But who knows? I suppose the two main categories are religious intolerance, this arrogance that you think, arguing over whose God is right, sort of gets me down a little bit, and I've got no problem with spirituality. I really haven't. That's another myth. And I always try and make the difference clear between spirituality and religion. One is a very personal feeling, a journey, a hope, or whatever, a need, a joy. And the other is an organized body that uses that for power and corruption in many cases. And I don't have either, but I suppose I think that when it affects me, that's when I have a say in it. And religion affects me. Religion's very real.
So we don't need God to be good.
We don't need God to be good, and even if we did, we haven't got him.
Quite right.
So there's no
point. Is what's true.
Yeah. I didn't choose to live, but I love it.
First and foremost, Ricky believes that we are all born atheists. What I think he means is that we don't have any concept of religion, God, or heaven or hell. And to a certain extent, I agree with him. However, we do have innate behaviors that we are born with. We refer to some of these behaviors as ethics. And these are things that even young children understand. When you see two toddlers playing with a toy or playing together with a toy, and one of them takes the toy from the other, the one who had the toy taken will start to cry. The one who has a toy innately understands that he caused his playmate distress and will usually either try to comfort or return the toy. These innate behaviors are codified in the 10 Commandments, so it appears that we are born with the framework of God's commandments, thus lending to the existence of God. Ricky goes on to talk about the unlikelihood of fortunate circumstance that everyone is born into the correct religion. Because wherever you were born or whatever religion is practiced in your area or with your family is the correct religion for you. But what he doesn't understand is that God is all-encompassing. In Genesis, man's vanity caused people to build a tower to reach heaven, to be equal with God. Obviously, God was displeased with this and as a result spread man across the whole of the planet and confused their languages so they couldn't communicate and thus cooperate. Over time, man developed different customs and thus different processes for worship, aka different religions. And each religion has a prescribed path for each member of that religion to be worthy of God's grace and entry into heaven. And finally, we get to the crux of Ricky's non-belief in God. He doesn't believe because there's no absolute proof that God exists. Now, I'm sure you can scour the internet and find a number of theologians who will cite a number of different scientific and historical facts that support the existence of God. And I'm sure you could also find a number of scientific and historical facts that support atheism. And don't get me wrong, I understand why people are searching for the existence of God. Man is naturally curious. And since the dawn of time, man has tried to understand his environment. And knowing that there's a God like Ricky claimed would likely be the single greatest discovery ever. But knowing that God exists removes what he asks of man, our belief in him. If you know something is inevitable, like the rising of the sun in the morning and setting in the evening, then there's no belief, it's just knowledge. So how do you get to believe in God when there's only correlating evidence to support the existence of God? You get there by another tool that God gave man, and that's faith. Well, what's faith? Well, my definition of faith is the belief in something, in this case God, with only correlating evidence to support that belief. In one of my previous videos, I referred to that as the reach, the emotional and spiritual extension of belief in something that you do not know exists, but believe that it does. The part that Ricky and many atheists like him don't understand is that God also gave man free will, the ability to override the innate programming that I talked about earlier and do whatever it is that you want to do, and like in his case, be an atheist. And because man has free will, if he believes in God and tries to live a moral, ethical life, he earns his way into God's grace, the good place. Now, I understand this presentation is going to be for everyone, and I'm not advocating for the belief in God because of this next bit, but if it allows you to take a very small step towards having faith and ultimately belief in God, well, so be it. I was once told that there really isn't any downside for living a moral and ethical life and believing in God. Because if atheists are right and there is no God and no heaven or hell, and then all I lost while on earth was a little bit of my time and a little bit of my money. My time I spent praying and conversing with God, and the money I tithed or donated in his name. And since I don't exist anymore, I'm not going to have any regrets, nor is it going to make any lasting difference. But if there is a God and eternal life after death in either heaven or hell, well, you get the picture. This concludes today's presentation of Office of the Patriot. If you enjoyed the content, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share my channel on your social media. It is appreciated. Also, please take the time to comment. Engagement is the major metric YouTube employs in their search algorithms. The more people that like and comment, the more my channel comes up when content like mine is searched for. And as always, have a blessed day and stay safe out there.